Hi, I'm Paula Storm. Thanks for joining me today on my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be working on the next part of our 4-part series based around this gorgeous quilt called A Beautiful Life. It's completely designed by my very good friend Tammie Green from Studio T Green. And not only did she design the quilt pattern, she also designed the fabric collection as well. This fabric collection is called Forget Me Not and it's distributed worldwide by Riley Blake. Remember, you do need to buy the quilt pattern for this quilt. There's links in the comments down below where you can also order a full kit, so you'll end up with a beautiful, stunning quilt just like mine. Okay, part 2, we're going to start on our applique, my favourite bit of the whole quilt. Now, I just wanted to let you know I've decided to use Visifix, so I'm using an iron-on glue basically. This is it here. It's like a paper on one side and a double-sided adhesive on the other side. So when you iron this onto your fabric, it'll make your applique shapes stick so that you can then stitch them down later on. So that's the way I've decided to make this quilt, but you could of course use needle turn, you could use raw edge, you could use any applique technique that you like. This is just the way I've chosen to do it. Okay, so first of all what we need to do is we need to trace out all of our shapes for the quilt. So I've done most of mine. This is the last one. I just wanted to show you how to do it. Okay, so what we're going to do is lay the Visifix over the top of the shape. Now I'm just going to do this balloon shape, and as you can see it's really quite easy to see through the Visifix to your shape on the background, but if you need to you can pop it up against a bright window and you'll be able to see it through even better. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace the shape of this balloon all the way around. I'm going to try and be as accurate as I can to get right on that line because we want these shapes to turn out as accurate and beautiful as they are on paper. So as I said, just try and be quite accurate and trace all the way around. Now you'll notice here I've got about 1/4 of an inch between the edge and the actual balloon. So I'm just going to trace that. You need to leave yourself that bit of room here at the edge for when you iron it onto your fabric. So make sure you give yourself a good 1/4 of an inch all the way around on your Visifix so you don't run into trouble later. So I'm just going to finish tracing up this one. Okay, so there we go. So there's my balloon shape. So, oh, it's a bit hard to see, but I've just traced around the very outside. I've already traced out these heart shapes, so just follow the pattern and you'll be able to, and you need to trace out as many as it says. So this pattern here, it says cut 2 hearts and cut 3 of the smaller hearts. So that's for you to applique onto the balloon later on. So just make sure you cut out the right amount of shapes. You'll need one for every shape. You'll need one Visifix tracing of each shape. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to trim this apart. Now as I mentioned, just make sure you give yourself a good 1/4 of an inch all the way around the outside, because if you don't, you'll end up with fraying edges later on. So I'm just going to trim that fairly roughly all the way around. Okay, so now I can get rid of that. And what I'm also going to do, I'm just going to trim up this excess down here, because when I iron this onto the fabric, I don't want to put the glue over the whole piece of fabric. So I'm just going to trim that up so I'm not wasting any fabric later. So that's what we need to do. We need to trace all of those shapes for every single shape in the quilt. So that's what I've done. I've traced all my pieces and I've ironed them onto my fabric. So I'm going to show you how to do that shortly with this one. But basically what we want to do is we want to iron it onto the back of the fabric and then cut it out perfectly on the line. That's why we needed to leave that extra shape around the outside, because we need to trim right on that line so that we get our perfect shape with the Visifix going right to the edge of the shape. So we're going to need to cut out all of our shapes. So we've got lots of different trees, we've got stems. Now the other thing I wanted to mention, when you are tracing these, just make sure you make a note. So I've written tree 5 on this piece. I've written tree 1 on this piece. Just make sure you write notes because the stems all very much look the same. So you don't want to mix up, put the wrong stem with the wrong tree. So this one's tree 4, this one's tree 6. So just make sure that you make notes on the back of all of your shapes to make it easier for you later on. Okay, so we're going to make all of those shapes, cut them all out so they're nice and flush. So here's my little hearts that I made for this balloon. So they're going to go on here later on with these 2 big hearts. So we'll pop the hearts like that, and then these little hearts will overlap. So you just need to cut out all of your shapes, and then I'm going to show you how to put them together. Now the other thing I wanted to mention with the three balloons, the 3 big balloons, what we need to do is we actually need to piece our fabric into strips to make the actual balloon. So I'm going to get rid of all of this, and I'm going to bring in that fabric. So I've cut my fabric to the right sizes. So there's the top half, there's the middle, and there's my bottom half. So what I need to do is I need to sew these 3 strips together and give them a really good press. So what I've decided to do is, in most cases you'll press to the darkest colour, but what I've decided to do is actually to press them away from this centre fabric. Because we're going to applique those hearts on the middle here, I don't actually want any bulk underneath here for when I applique these shapes onto my fabric. So when you're making this strip here, make sure that you just press those seams out. So we're going to press this one towards the red and press this one towards the bottom flowery fabric. So we're going to piece that one together. So that's the right hot air balloon. I also have the middle hot air balloon. Now this one's a bit different. So there's my applique paper there, my Visifix. What we're doing with this one is we're still doing the strips. So I've got the middle strip, the bottom strip, and the top strip. But what we're doing with this one is we're actually piecing together these little flag shapes to make our balloon. So what we need to do is we need to use the shape. So this has come off the pattern. So I've just cut that out from the top page, the top pattern page. And what we need to do is cut these shapes to the exact same size as that template. So we need to cut 4 of each. So I've got 4 of these aquarelle colours, and then I've got 4 of the flowery fabrics as well. So I'm going to put one there, one there, one there. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew those together and then join them into the finished piece. So we'll end up like this. Okay, so it's time for the fun bit. Time to start sticking all of these down. Now what I've done is I've just used what's called an applique mat. And an applique mat is just like a piece of Teflon or something like that you can iron these to join them together. So I can join the stem to the top part of the flower. If you haven't got that, you can also just leave them in separate parts and join them together when you iron them onto your background. So that's another way of doing this. I just thought it'd be easier to show you on camera if the stems were already joined. So I've joined all of my trees, and now it's just the fun part to start laying it out. Now there is a layout on the actual pattern, so if you take the pattern you'll be able to see that you can put them in exactly the same place as what's on the pattern, or you can just make it your own and you can lay them out wherever you like. So I'm actually going to follow the pattern, and I'm just going to start with the trees. I'm going to do half and half because this is quite a big section now. I can't actually do the whole thing at once. So I'm just going to start with the bottom, and then I'll move it down once I've ironed these into place, and I'll do the sky part and all the balloons and things. So starting off with these, we've got this one down here. This is probably the biggest, and this is classed as tree 4. So I'm going to pop that down the bottom here, kind of overlapping onto this bottom blue part. I've got this one here, goes kind of in the middle, and if you look on the pattern you'll see where they kind of overlap on these pieces. So you just close enough is good enough, so I wouldn't worry too much about making it perfect. This one goes over here, overlapping onto this blue section. We've got this beautiful big red tree, and this one is pretty much over here. Then I've got this one which overlaps into the sky part, and this one is going to sit Oh, I've got two there. This one's going to sit kind of here, and this one up over here. So once you've got them laid out in the positions that you want them, you'll need to actually iron these down. Now, because I don't want to move this, I don't want to take it over to my ironing board, what I'm going to do is just grab my ironing mat, and I'm just going to slide my ironing mat underneath. And if you don't have an ironing mat, of course you can just do this on your ironing board. I just like to be able to lay the whole thing out so I can see where everything's going to go. So I'm just going to slide that underneath, and I'm going to do a few at a time. So I'm going to start with this one here. I'm going to grab my iron, and once again just follow the rules that come with your visor fix or your heat and bond, whatever you use as a fusible web. Just follow the directions on the pattern. I know this brand only needs, you know, 5 to 10 seconds, and that is really well stuck down now. So that's the first one. I'm going to move over to this big one, just going to make sure it's all the way on my ironing board. And I'm going to make sure too that my seams aren't sticking up. I don't know if you can see on camera there, but it was just a little bit wonky underneath there with the seams. So I'm just going to make sure it's nice and flat, and then drop my iron on. Try not to move your iron around too much. Don't kind of go like this with your iron, because it can shift the fabric and it can move it and create like little bubbles underneath. So just be very gentle. Try not to move your iron around too much until it's actually stuck down. Okay, so there's the first two. Now what I'm going to do is just going to move my ironing board along underneath here. Try and carefully slide it along so I can do these two here. So I'm just going to make sure that they're fully on the board. That looks good there. Make sure that one's in the right spot there. Might just move it just a fraction this way so it's more centered. So there we go. I'm happy with the placement of those two. I'm making sure that my seam allowances underneath aren't poking up. And once again, I'm just going to iron those two into position. So that one completely fits under my iron, so I'm just not going to move it around too much. Just going to make sure it sticks, and then I'm going to move over to this one. Now because this is quite a large tree, I'm going to have to iron this in sections. So I'm just going to slowly slide my iron over, and I'm kind of picking it up in between moving it, so I'm pressing rather than sliding the iron like this. Okay, so that one's done. So I'm just going to continue moving my ironing mat around until I've ironed all my trees and stuck them all down. Okay, so there's all my trees ironed down. The next thing I need to do is start adding my hot air balloons and some of the clouds. So I'm just going to fold this up and slide it down. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. Now in the pattern, this top section, this sky, is actually overcut a fraction. So it's about 1.5 inches too high. That's been done just in case these seam allowances down here are a bit funny and your piece isn't the right height. So before you actually iron on your visor fix right at the top there, just make sure that this whole piece is the right height. So just double check your pattern, make sure that you trim off that top section, because you don't want to iron some of your shapes on and then lose them when you trim it to size. So just make sure you do that before you iron on your shapes. I'm just going to keep in mind that I'm going to lose about 1.5 inches at the top, so I'm not going to iron anything up there. Okay, so next up we've got some of the hot air balloons and the clouds. So I've got my shapes, I'm just going to leave them here. So first of all, I might actually place out my hot air balloons, or some of them I should say. I'm going to take my one that goes in the middle, because this one on the pattern, it actually overlaps a fraction down into this main body of the quilt. So I'm just going to slide that down, and I've got my little basket as well, and that one goes like that. So that's kind of right in the middle of the quilt, so I'm going to lay that one down first. Next up, I've got my one up in the top corner here. So this one is in the 3 shapes, and I've also got my little basket. So this one goes quite high up in the sky. Let me move that down so you can see. So this one, keeping in mind that I'm going to lose that 1.5 inches at the top. Let me move it all the way down so you can see. So see, I'm going to lose 1.5 inches up here, so I'm not going to put it too close to the top there. So I'm just going to lay that until it lines up beautifully. What you want to do is line up those seam lines here that you've got from the joining of the fabric. You want to get that kind of as close to straight as possible. It might not happen depending on where you placed your visor fix or where you cut your shapes before. So just get it as close as you can. So that's that one, and again I'm putting it, just like I did here, I'm putting it on a bit of an angle to look like it's really flying. And then I've got my little basket, so I'm going to slide that back up. Okay, now the last hot air balloon actually overlaps onto the piecing. So that goes right up in the top corner and overlaps onto the pinwheels that we're going to do next time. So I'm actually not going to iron that one down at all yet. I'm just going to place it up towards the top to keep in mind that that's where I need it to be in the finished piece. So I'm just going to kind of put that over in the corner so that I know where to put my clouds. Okay, so we're almost done, just got the pretty little clouds. So I've got 4 of these, I think 4 cute little clouds. So I'm going to pop one here, one over here, and then some more over here. So I've got one over here and one down here. Now of course you can keep adding more shapes if you like. If you want some more clouds, for example, if you want some more trees, absolutely cut some more. You should have a little bit of scrap left over from your kit, from your fabric kit, so you go right ahead and add whatever pieces you would like at this stage. Okay, so I'm happy with the layout. So what I'm going to do, except for this one, as I said, we're not going to iron that one down yet. We're going to save that until we've added our row of pinwheels across the top. So I'm not going to iron that one, but I am going to iron the rest of these shapes into place. And once again, if you don't have an ironing mat, you can absolutely use your ironing board. You can also just put the hot iron in a few places just to set it in place, and then you can take the whole thing to your ironing board and give it a press on the ironing board, so that can make it a little bit easier too. Once you've finished ironing all your pieces into position, it's time to take it over to the machine and start doing some of the applique stitches. I've used a variety of stitches, from the regular blanket stitch right through to the decorative stitches that come on your machine. Okay, so I've got my decorative stitch in, and I'm just going to drop my needle down and make sure it's in exactly the right spot, because I don't want it to fall too far outside of the balloon. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to press the fix button on my machine. What the fix button does is it actually creates like a little knot, so it stitches up and down in the one spot 5 times, and that effectively ties off for me, so I don't have to do a reverse stitch. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I've got this decorative stitch in, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow the red line on my foot, and I'm going to keep that red line centered right the way through my applique, so that I get a really nice double-sided effect. The other thing that this machine does that I absolutely love is it has this pivot feature. So when I stop, it actually lifts up the foot, so I can just slide my fabric around in any direction without having to stop, lift my presser foot, drop my presser foot back down. So this Husqvarna Viking Sapphire is a beautiful machine for doing applique. So I'm just changing direction, so I'll stop. Stop and rearrange my hands, make sure that everything's out of the way, so I'm only sewing through this one piece of fabric. When you go to change directions, just try and make sure that you're at the start of the pattern repeat. So in this case, I'm going forward 1 stitch, then I go out to one side, then back to the same spot, then I go forward a bit and then out to the other side and back. So just make sure that you're back in the center before you start moving your fabric around. Okay, so now that I'm here, I'm going to go back to the center and I'm going to once again do a fixed stitch. Now if I wanted to, I could just change direction. I could just change direction and come back up this direction up here. But because this design actually goes downwards, so it's a directional design, I'm actually going to stop and go back up to the top, because if I just continued on here, these little bits would be going up instead of down. So I'm just going to go back to the start. Once again, I'm going to do my fixed stitch. I'll drop my needle right down at that point, and away we go. So there we go. That's the beautiful little applique stitch that I've used for that part. Now what I'm going to do is change my stitch, and I'm going to go back to just a regular buttonhole stitch, and I'm going to buttonhole all the way around this balloon. Now I might actually start at the bottom here at the point. So I've changed my stitch. Now what I've set is a buttonhole stitch, and I've set it on 2.5 in both directions. When I'm doing my buttonhole, I like to have the forward stitch land just outside my applique. I think it gives a much neater finish. If you have the long stitch actually grabbing your applique fabric, you'll create a lot of fraying, and it can make it look a bit messy. So I like to have that straight line land just outside the applique. So the only thing holding my applique down is the actual bite in the stitch. Now before I get up to the top, I'm just going to trim off these threads. So they were the starting threads from when I went down here, and I can cut those off nice and close because I did that fixed stitch at the start, so I don't have to worry about pulling it to the back and tying it off. Okay, once again, before I get back to the start, I'm just going to trim off that little bit of that little tail from the start. Again, I use that fixed stitch so I don't have to worry about pulling it to the back. And then I'm just going to go straight right back to the start, and I'm going to overlap it for a stitch or two just to make sure it's nice and held down. And now I'm going to do my fixed stitch once again and cut my threads. Now while I'm here, I'm actually going to just do my little basket. On this machine, I also have the ability to be able to mirror reverse my stitches. So as you can see here, I had the straight stitch this side, and then I had the bite going in. Well, if I flip my design, it will actually be the opposite way. So now I don't have to turn all my fabric around. I can just flip my stitch and it will go the opposite direction for me. So I'm going to do my fix. And see how now it's flipping in the opposite direction? The bite's going to my right instead of to my left. Now when it comes to the corner, I'm going to try and be as neat as possible. So I think I can do one more. And now I'm going to turn, and I'm actually going to let the bite go in at a diagonal. And then I'm going to stop on the outside and then spin it all the way around, and this way you get a really nice neat corner. And once again I'm going to do that diagonal stitch so it's nice and neat. Now before I get to the last stitch, I'm actually going to press the fix button so that it will do my fixed stitch right in that corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll cut. To finish up this part of the quilt, all we need to do is go ahead and applique all of the shapes. That includes all of the balloons, all of the trees, all of the clouds. And once you've finished that, we are finished part 2. Next time we're going to move on to the pinwheels. We're going to create the pinwheels and the borders on the outside of the quilt. So I hope you can join me next time. Once again, thanks to Tammie Green from Studio T Green for creating this beautiful quilt, and to Riley Blake for supplying all the fabric for this quilt along.